From the fall of 2012 through most of 2015, Pastor Saeed Abedini and his wife Naghmeh were the public face of persecuted Christians. Yet in November 2015, that all changed. In a leaked email, Naghmeh told supporters that she'd been abused by her husband. And suddenly, she went from being the darling of the Christian community to an outcast. And she says those, like Franklin Graham and Sekulow, who had long supported her, began pressuring her to make the accusations go away. Welcome to The Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys. And joining me today with her truly stunning story of being abused by her husband and then shunned by the Christian community when she spoke of that abuse is Naghmeh Panahi. Naghmeh is the former wife of Pastor Saeed Abedini, and as you probably remember, Pastor Saeed made international news in 2012 when he was sentenced to 8 years in prison in Iran for evangelizing. And over the next 3 years, Naghmeh became a well-known advocate for Saeed. But as she'll explain, behind that advocacy was a secret history of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Yet when Naghmeh opened up about that abuse, she didn't receive empathy and support from the Christian community. Instead, she says she received scorn. And for the first time, she's released emails from Christian leaders like Franklin Graham showing exactly how she was treated. She's also released audio from a meeting that she had with Franklin Graham in 2016. All of this, I think you'll find extremely eye-opening. But before we begin our discussion, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this podcast, Judson University and Marquardt of Barrington. Judson University is a top-ranked Christian university providing a caring community and an excellent college experience. Plus, the school offers more than 60 majors, great leadership opportunities, and strong financial aid. Judson University is shaping lives that shape the world. For more information, just go to judsonu.edu. Also, if you're looking for a quality new or used car, I highly recommend my friends at Marquardt of Barrington. Marquardt is a Buick GMC dealership where you can expect honesty, integrity, and transparency. That's because the owners there, Dan and Kurt Marquardt, are men of character. To check them out, just go to buyacar123.com. Well, again, joining me today is Naghmeh Panahi. As I've stated, she's the former wife of Iranian-American Pastor Saeed Abedini. She's also an abuse survivor whose story not only sheds light on the confusion surrounding abuse, it also shows how abysmally the Christian community sometimes responds to abused wives, especially if their husbands are Christian leaders. So Naghmeh, welcome. It's truly an honor to have you join me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Naghmeh, I know that you've been on an incredibly difficult, a painful journey, yet in many ways, you've been vindicated. Many of the allegations that you leveled against Saeed back in 2015 have been affirmed by the courts, and it's my understanding you have full custody of your children, and even right now, there's a warrant out for Saeed's arrest in Idaho. Is that correct?
I have been vindicated. Everything I said about the abuse and the danger that the kids and I were under came to light, and I was awarded full custody of the kids, thankfully.
And the warrant out for Saeed's arrest, that's true in Idaho. He didn't show up to court, is that right? And so if he steps foot in Idaho, he could be arrested.
Yes, he has a warrant out for his arrest in Idaho. And he hasn't been in Idaho since March of 2018.
You're not speaking to me today because you have something to prove about Saeed or about the allegations that you leveled against him. Instead, it's my understanding that you're speaking to me because of the experience that you recently had when you posted an article that I published about Ben Corson. And for those of you who don't know, Ben is a megachurch pastor from Oregon who's been accused of sexual misconduct and abuse. And Naghmeh, you simply posted about how this story hits close to home for you, and you urged the church to deal with Ben and Ben's sin in a biblical manner. Would you tell me what the response was to that and kind of how that prompted you to do what you're doing today?
So it hit close to home because he was a really big name in the Calvary Chapel circles. When I shared, there was a lot of backlash again, to be silent. You're damaging the cause of Christ. You're causing division. This is The outside world's going to look at this and laugh at us. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this publicly? Even though Ben had admitted to the sexual misconduct / abuse, I was attacked again to be silent. So with Ben Corson's stuff coming out, I just almost went silent again. And then I prayed about it. And I thought, no, I'm going to speak, and I'm going to speak things I've never spoken before. It actually emboldened me because there was so much voice trying to silence me. And I went back to 6 years ago when there was all those voices, and I felt so ashamed, and I didn't want to damage the cause of Christ. I was being bullied into silence. And I did go silent for a season. And this time I said, you know what? No, my battle's done. My kids are safe. I am safe. Everything I said about Saeed I've been vindicated about his abuse, physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological, his adultery, his porn, everything has been vindicated. And so it's not about me. It's been 6 years. It's about the many, many women, especially in children, and, at times men, that are not believed when they come out and speak out about abuse in the church or abuse in their household. And your article on Ben Corson is what motivated me to not be silent anymore.
Well, I'm so glad we published that, because I think your story, not just Ben's story, but your story is so unbelievably powerful. And I had no idea, like you said, you're speaking out for the first time about the extent of the abuse. But I do think one of the things about your story that was puzzling, and like you hinted at it, because you said you didn't see what he was doing to you, even though, as you'll explain, as we go through your story, you were beat to a pulp almost, terrified for your life at times, yet you didn't see this as abuse. Would you explain why that is, coming from your particular cultural context and even the Christian context that says, wives, just take it and love your husband, and God will change him?
I didn't see it as abuse, even when I was physically beaten to almost death when I was pregnant with my daughter. As you said, one of it is cultural. Women are not treated with a lot of dignity and respect in the Middle East. The culture I was raised in put in with the theology of the Proverbs 31, the wrong understanding of Proverbs 31, because the Proverbs 31 woman is a fearless woman who only fears the Lord. She does not bow down to abuse or corruption. But the wrong understanding of Proverbs 31 is really what helped the abuse to flourish. And, my pastor, he knew Saeed was into porn. He knew Saeed was violent, and he didn't blink an eye. He just was he didn't really call it abuse. He didn't say, you're an abused wife, you need to get out. And, years later, I realized why, because he was into the same things as my husband had been. He was an abusive pastor. So unfortunately, the culture of the church and my own Middle Eastern culture, I didn't see it as abuse. I said, okay, maybe I'm a selfish, prideful person who can't handle much. And I'm just not, I just need to suck it up and be a good Christian wife.
Wow. And your pastor, Bob Caldwell, Calvary Chapel, Boise, Idaho, that's who you're talking about. He actually plays a role in your story. He does advocate for you, interestingly, later on when this comes out, and we'll get to that part of the story. He did do some good on your behalf, but exactly right. He did resign because he had an adulterous affair, which he admitted to, and some other things. I think to understand what happened to you and the church's response to abuse, we first have to understand the abuse that you were under. Let's back up like 20 years when you and Saeed first met. So I understand it, you had graduated from college, went back to Iran because you wanted to reach people for the Lord. And so you met him there. And would you just explain what your early relationship was like, your dating relationship, and just those first few years of marriage? Did you start to see kind of some of the seeds of what later became much more serious abuse?
Yeah. So I went to, actually, we just passed the 20th year anniversary of September 11. So I went to Iran exactly 20 years ago. And September 11 played a big role. I was a very strong believer, conservative girl. And when President Bush spoke about terrorism and sending military, in my mind, I was going to the Middle East to share the gospel, to change the atmosphere. And in my mind, I thought that's the answer. It's not soldiers, it's soldiers for Christ. About a year into it, I had a few, 5 or 6 people who'd come to know the Lord, mainly family and cousins. And I ended up visiting a building church, Central Assemblies of God in the middle of Tehran, the capital of Iran. And Saeed was, I saw him, he was praying for people. He was very charismatic. He would lay hands on people, they would fall. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never been part of a charismatic church or movement. And so I thought, that's spiritual. That's amazing. Soon I got lured into a relationship with him. And because of the purity movement, at that time, I had not dated anyone. I was very innocent, very naive. And early on, there was something in my spirit, red flags that now I see. It was the Holy Spirit saying, back off. He started putting me down. He said, you're so dark. Your dark hair is so ugly. Your eyebrows, you need to do surgery. Your eyes, you need to pull them up a little, like push them up, kind of your nose. He started tearing me apart. And I was skinny. He called me fat. I was like a size 4, I think. And he picked apart my looks, my weight. And I didn't know that was abuse of tearing me down. So I lost confidence. At that time, I was a very confident girl. My dad was a businessman and had given me a lot of confidence in his businesses. He'd have me travel for him, making deals with big companies. So I was a very confident businesswoman making $1 million deals and working with my dad, and my dad always praised me. And, and so I didn't realize what Saeed was doing was breaking me down, my confidence down so he could control me. So one thing that kept happening in our courtship was him putting me down, and I started believing it. I started wanting to hide my face and piling on makeup and thinking I'm so ugly. I just need to cover up, because you want to please your future spouse. The other thing he did, he started questioning my relationship with my parents, my friends. He would say, oh, I see spiritual problems in your sister. Oh, your brother has this. So I started believing him because he was this charismatic leader, and I believed everything he said. And so he started isolating me, where I didn't trust anyone around me but him. There was pushing and shoving. And if I did something that upset him, he would just give me the silent treatment. He wouldn't talk to me for days. Sometimes, weeks. This all happened in our courting. And there was a few times where I just threw the ring and I said, I'm done. But somehow I ended up back in it. I had never been with a man. And, early on in our relationship, which abusers do, he crossed sexual boundaries. We didn't have sex, but he kissed me. He forcefully kissed me. So I thought, oh, I'm damaged goods, because the purity movement said your first kiss should be at your wedding. So in my mind, I thought, he's kissed me, I got to marry him. That's how naive I was. And, it progressed into other things. We're taking off our clothes and so on, never sex, but I felt like I was damaged goods. No man would ever want to marry me.
So in 2005, this few years after you were married, the two of you were returning to the U.S. and you had to stop, I believe, in Dubai. You were awaiting a visa for Saeed so he could enter the U.S. And there was a horrifying incident, as you've described to me privately. Would you talk about what led to that and then what happened?
Yeah, the house church, when I went to Iran after September 11, God really took me there at his perfect time. That was at the beginning of the house church movement, really happened around a couple of years later, 2003, 2004, and we were at the forefront of it. So it grew quickly, and the Iranian government took a note of it. And I myself was arrested a few times, threatened to be killed and raped if I didn't deny Christ. And God delivered me from that. So there were so many arrests that we just thought we need to leave. This is not good for us. This is not good for the house churches, because the government is tracking us and they're going to find all the leaders if we continue. So that's when we decided to leave Iran. And we had I think it was a Baptist church that we were in communication with that basically said, you can come to Dubai. We have an apartment. You can have it until Saeed can get a visa, stay there. So we'd arrived in Dubai and someone picked us up, and we got to the apartment late at night, probably 12 midnight, 1 a.m. And I was so tired. I just, and Saeed had packed the suitcases, and he always packed them so perfectly, so clean. And I just opened the suitcase that was mine, and I was looking for my nightgown. I was tired, and I didn't realize at that time, but I was about 2 months pregnant with my daughter. And I was, and those early months, anyone who's been pregnant knows you're super tired, even above and beyond what's normal. And I was just tired. And there was the stress of having left persecution. We didn't know if they were going to stop us at the airport, what was going to happen. And I was looking for my nightgown. So I was throwing clothes around. And he said, Saeed said, "You're making a mess." And I said, "So what?" And that was it. Before I knew it, a lot of people don't know this, or they might know this. Saeed was trained by Hezbollah, which is a terrorist group. So before he became, quote, an unquote Christian, so he knew how to kill with his hands. And I'm a pretty weak person. I was born as a twin. I was always the weaker twin. People thought, doctors always thought, she's not going to survive. She's really weak. I was always the scrawny, sickly twin. So I was not a very strong person. So next thing I know, Saeed is beating me up. I'm having bruises all over. I have bumps like the cartoons. I remember looking at myself and thinking, this is what happened. I would laugh at Tom and Jerry, where, Tom would get hit and there would be a bump in his, I think Tom is the cat, but, and so, I remember looking in the mirror and thinking there's bumps coming out of my head. I had just the abuse, the physical. I remember I was getting kicked so many times in my tummy, including in my tummy where the baby was, and all over my body, punched in the face, in the head, kicked in the face, in the head. I just remember crawling to the bathroom and locking the door, thinking, I'm going to die. And no one's listening to my screaming and yelling. This is the Middle East. This is normal. I'm sorry to say it, but this is normal for women to be screaming and yelling, no police, nothing. And that's the first really bad incident. Before that incident, which was November of 2015, and Saeed and I had gotten married 2014, and I'd met him 2012. So the 3 years that I'd been with him, there was pushing and shoving and spitting at me and things like that. But somehow, again, I dismissed those. This beating was the first full-on beating that was a near-death experience.
Must have been absolutely terrifying. And yet, I mean, at that point, you didn't leave him. I mean, at that point, I don't know if it was because of, again, the cultural, the conditioning that he had already given you to think kind of low of yourself. You justified this somehow. You rationalized it. How did you do that?
That I talked back. I shouldn't have said, so what? He's tired. He's under a lot of stress. Like you said, I've already been degraded to a point where I just didn't think so high of myself, that I didn't say, this is not the way to be treated. I was attached. There's trauma bonding that happens with abusers. I'd never dated. He was the first man I'd ever kissed or been with, sexually or anything. I was bonded. I didn't know how to break free. And I had two choices. I was pregnant with my daughter. I could walk away and be a single mom, which I was deathly afraid of. And that, again, in my culture and in the church culture, divorce is taboo. And being a single mom was a big fear of mine. So I had a choice to draw the boundary and say, no, this is it. You just beat me up pretty bad. This is it. Or downplay it, minimize it, justify it to keep the marriage and to keep our family together, which I thought was godly. And, all the women's retreats that I went to, all the teachings of Proverbs 31 is being a quiet spirit and not, being loud and just submitting. And so I thought, I'm going to do my part and God's going to bless that. It wasn't until recently that God revealed his heart to me that no, I do not, submission to abuse and corruption is not from me. That's not, that's not honoring me. That's actually dishonoring me. So I thought that was the godly thing to do. And so I decided to minimize in my mind and justify it. And I was pregnant with my daughter and I didn't want our family broken up.
The two of you then ended up settling in Boise, Idaho, as I understand. But 2 years later, so in 2007, the same thing happens, except this time you're actually on a Skype call with his family members, right?
He was on a Skype call with his parents and his sister, and he was saying things. And I said, that's not true. He was putting me down. He was saying something. And again, I said something like, that's not true. And he left the computer. He came after me, grabbed me by my collar, by my around my neck, and shoved me against the wall and started rebuking demons out of me. And I saw the same thing in his eyes as I'd seen in Dubai. And I want to say between 2005, where he beat me pretty bad in Dubai, until 2007, he accomplished his goal, which was I was willing to do anything not to get him to that point of anger. I wouldn't talk back. My pastor had told me, seeing Saeed angry a few times and seeing my life in danger, had told me, just cook and clean and don't try to tell him anything. Because I tell my pastor, but he's watching pornography, but I think he's, he goes out to clubs and people have seen him with women. And my pastor had seen him being very aggressive with me. But, my pastor's advice to me was just submit and be quiet. Between 2005 and 2007, I had I was the shell of a person. I would submit to anything he would say. I would not talk back because I did not want to get him I knew that he could kill me. I knew now. And he grabbed me and he shoved me against the wall. And I thought, I'm going to die. And my daughter's sitting, my infant 10-month-old daughter is watching this happen. I didn't know what to do. And I just cried out to God. In my mind, I thought, God, please deliver me. And all of a sudden he left me and he grabbed his computer and went to the office and closed the door because he realized he needed to finish his conversation with his parents before he came back and did what he needed to do to punish me. And finally, I was afraid his phone call with his parents was going to be over soon and he was going to come after me. And I just didn't know what was going to happen to my daughter, what he was going to do in front of her. So I called the police and they took him. So that's the 2007 incident.
And that actually led to a conviction, even though you didn't want him to be convicted. In fact, you testified on his behalf at the trial. Is that right?
Yeah. The next day, I just woke up thinking, what have I done? I am pregnant with my son. I was pregnant again. And I have a daughter. I cannot be in a broken home. I cannot be a single mom. Kids need their dad. And I felt so ashamed and guilty for having called the police on him. I paid $3,000 and got a lawyer and went and testified to get him out. At that time, it was no longer me against Saeed. It had become a state of Idaho against Saeed. So I couldn't necessarily drop the charges, but I tried to reduce it as much as I could. And he ended up being released with, he had to take like an anger management class, but it still came out as a domestic abuse charge. So, which Saeed actually admitted in 2007.
Well, as I understand it, there were other outbursts of abuse at one point. Saeed, and this is from reading the divorce proceedings, which are public, that you provided me, but he smashed a window of your mom's car. He trashed parts of your parents' home. In 2010, he broke your father's nose. And interestingly, even in the transcript of what he said at the divorce proceedings, he admitted he broke your dad's nose, but he said he was defending you from your father, that your father was trying to beat you up. What really happened?
That's an interesting incident because later my lawyer said my lawyer and his lawyer had agreed not to talk about the nose breaking, him beating my dad. They had come to an agreement. If I won't bring it up, if you don't bring it up, and Saeed brought it up himself. It's
fair
like
game.
One of my friends was like, the mouth of a fool are a tool in God's hand. He just brought up all the abuse he did. And I just went in the middle between my grandma and my dad. And I said, hey, let's just not argue about this. Because my grandma was getting very heated, like that she was really upset that my dad wasn't visiting her 3 times a week. And he would only bring her, they would play card games together once a week. And so I said, let's just not argue. And the kids were there. I didn't want argument in front of the kids. And before I know it, and my dad basically, who's never, ever beat me. And unfortunately, he passed away of COVID last year. But my dad, who's never beat me in his life, looked at me and said, Naghmeh, back off. And again, the same thing that happened to me in Dubai happened to my dad in 2010. Next thing I know, my dad is bracing himself and Saeed is kicking and punching him in the head, in his body. And my dad is just crawling around trying to get away. And the doctor report showed his nose had been so badly broken that the doctor said it could have killed him. It could have actually affected somehow into the brain, or the police said, you know what's going to happen next time, someone's going to die if you guys don't press charges. But we didn't press charges. And there was other incidents where I had a golden retriever dog and Saeed would beat him up, and I would come and golden retrievers are the sweetest, kindest dogs.
Yeah, they are.
Never seen anything bad from my dog. And I would see Saeed beat him up and I would say, what are you doing? And Saeed would say, well, he was trying to attack me. I'm like, he's never attacked anyone. And so it's, again, beating of animals. And unfortunately, I ended up getting rid of my dog for his protection. And in my own mind, I didn't walk away myself.
And all this time, and this is where it's just, I don't know, just mind-blowing to me, the compartmentalization, where he can travel back and forth from Iran, establishing orphanages, meeting with church leaders, and all these things, and at the same time behaving this way. At one point in 2012, as I understand it, you were with his parents and his father started beating you. And at this point, you were like,
I'm leaving.
Yeah. And you did leave. You took the kids, right? And you went to your parents had a house about 45 minutes out of Tehran. Is that correct?
Yeah. How did you know this detail? Was it in the court transcript?
Yeah, I did a lot of research.
I'm like, not a lot of people know this. Yes, I was a bad decision to go to Iran with kids because women have no rights. I could not leave the country. Husbands have full custody of kids no matter what. You have to have permission to leave. Your kids have to have permission to leave. Saeed would leave me alone in the apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment with his mom, dad, sisters. It was about 10 people and a dog. They had a small dog. And I was homeschooling the kids. I couldn't get out. I was afraid. He was leaving me. He was putting me down. It was abuse coming from his family. My parents had a house 45 minutes away. I called one of my dad's friends to come pick us up, and his dad didn't want us to leave. So he started attacking me. And I thought, whoa. And his dad had beat up. Saeed grew up in a domestic violence home. His dad was always beating his mom, cheating on her, all of that. But he'd never touched me. And I thought, whoa, this is now transferring over to the dad. And one night I just lost it. And I said, I want to go back. And I just had an emotional breakdown. And he said, you're mentally ill. You need to see a doctor. And he took me to an Iranian psychiatrist the next day. And Saeed spoke the whole time. The psychiatrist didn't talk to me. The reason I say this is because Saeed has mentioned over and over again that I'm mentally ill. He took me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist, after talking to Saeed for half an hour, Iranian psychiatrist, wrote a prescription that I had schizophrenia, OCD, and Parkinson's. I immediately took a photo of that, sent it to my doctor here. And my doctor said, don't touch that medication. It's going to destroy you. So we left. And when I left, I realized Saeed has all our passports, and this is not America. I can't just leave. And I start freaking out after I left to my parents' home, and I called him and I said, Saeed, can you please give me my passport? I want to leave the country. He said, nope. And basically, he wanted me to come back. He said, you need to make it up to my family what happened last night. In order to come back, I had to come back to their apartment. I couldn't stay at the safe place where my parents had a house. I had to come back, and I had to kiss his dad's feet and his sister's feet because I had upset them. I had to go to the ground and kiss their feet and ask for apology to be able to come back to the apartment. And then he continued to keep my passport. And then he said, you need to see it. I said, what do I need to do? And he took me to the doctor. Long story short, I agreed. And finally, he allowed me to leave the country because I said, I said, your parents can't come to America. You need me to work to be able to sponsor them to come to America. If you keep me here, how are they going to come to America? And I convinced him that it was wise for me and the kids to go back. And so this idea of saying I'm crazy, the reason I'm bringing it up is such a normal thing by abusers to do, whether it's a pastor trying to discredit someone coming up against them to discredit that person, or it's a wife. That the idea of trying to present that the wife as crazy and unstable is so normal. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. But yeah, beginning of 2012, his dad was physically beating me, and I was stuck in Iran with not being able to leave the country until God really truly delivered me. Because you can't leave the country without husband's permission. You just can't. Even if I had a passport, I couldn't leave. The husband has to literally write a permission saying, I allow her to leave.
Wow. Such a misogynistic culture. I mean, it's just unbelievable how women have so few rights. And the gaslighting you're talking about, again, yes, completely classic abuser kind of behavior. So we've got a pattern of abuse. We have both physically, sexually, in the sense that he's got this porn addiction that you have to live with, mentally, psychologically. I mean, what he did to you to make you take drugs, or to try to make you take drugs that, could have been very harmful to you. Infidelity on top of all this. And then he gets arrested, 2012. Did it ever enter your mind at that point when he got arrested, great, I'm free of this marriage. I'm done. I mean, did that ever enter your mind, or it was like,
I wish that would have entered my mind. No, it did not. And I don't know why, except for God's sovereignty in all of this and allowing it. No, actually, what even might make me come across as insane to people is that actually right before his arrest, I had a pretty good idea that he was cheating on me, but I refused to believe it. So I don't know why I didn't see it, but at that time when he got arrested, in my mind, I thought, I'm going to prove to Saeed how much I love him, and I'm going to save our family. I'm going to fight for him. He's finally going to be not with other girls. In my mind, I didn't want to believe he cheated on me, but I thought he's going to just want to, be faithful to me. But I really knew, but I didn't want to know. And I thought, I'm going to save our marriage. I'm going to fix this. He's going to see what a faithful wife and loving wife I am. And maybe this is how our marriage is going to get saved, by me being the hero wife and him finally appreciating that.
So this is where many of us learned of your story. I remember at the time I was working at Moody Radio, and I remember, I think you were probably on Moody Radio. I know we prayed for you.
Yes, I was on Moody Radio.
I thought so. We prayed for you. Your story was huge at this point, and you're going on Fox News and CNN. At one point, I think you spoke before the UN, didn't you? And I mean, government bodies. I mean, it's unbelievable, and you're so well spoken. I mean, you wouldn't know that this is a wife who's been, toiling away, supporting her husband being abused and everything else. You were so well spoken, like you've been doing this your whole life. It's really amazing. And it's about this time that you mentioned Franklin Graham, CEO of both Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. He gets involved. Would you describe Franklin Graham's involvement, what he did for you personally, but also I think he lobbied for you with some pretty high-level politicians?
He did. Franklin Graham got involved early on. I was doing an interview in Nashville with CBN and the Moss Group, which was doing my media. Some of the people that worked there came up to me and said, oh, we represent the ACLJ, but there's someone else we represent. I said, oh, who's that? And they said, it's Franklin Graham. And that was the first time that, his name was brought up, that the Moss represented both ACLJ and Franklin Graham. And I thought, that's interesting. And then someone, I think one of my lawyers at ACLJ said, Franklin could help. And I thought, how? I mean, I know Billy Graham was an evangelist, and I mean, how can Franklin help? And And I was told that, he's very much connected with really crazy governments that usually don't allow Christians into their country, like North Korea and China and Russia, and I don't know, all this. And so they said he might be able to use that influence. Those countries could be the one that would be advocating for you to get Saeed out, because sometimes if America steps in, it gets harder. So I remember calling his office. I think I talked to his vice president or someone pretty high up at Samaritan's Purse. And I did tell them I had spoken to Saeed on the phone, that Saeed had some access. At that time, Saeed did not have his own phone. He had some access to talk directly with me. I told them, and later ACLJ found out and said, no one can know that you're having any access with Saeed, because if it ever leaks out, Saeed could get in a lot of trouble with the Iranian government because it was all smuggled phone. So I did tell that person, I said, can I talk to Franklin? They said, well, he's on a road trip, but we'll have him call you. I think about a day later, he called me. He had bad reception. He was on his motorcycle trip. And he said, I will do whatever. Tell me what I need to do. And I have an email where I sent him, basically, I said, can you use your connection with countries? Can you, make this story known, and so on. And he got involved pretty fast. He sent people from Decision magazine, and it became the front story. He would fly his private jet and have me speak at Samaritan's Purse and Billy Graham Association. And to get the word out, he did get the word out. He had meetings with different governments towards the end of Saeed's imprisonment. I want to say towards the end of 2015. I know he met with the Russian president and talked directly to Putin about Saeed. So I actually got a call from him saying that. And on his social media, you can see he visited the president of Russia. But at that point, what I heard was the Russians told Franklin that America was already making a deal, and there was a process of getting the Americans out, so Russia couldn't step in.
He did give you some money. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, every time I spoke, the first time I spoke, he gave me, I think, $5,000 honorarium. I didn't even know what honorariums were.
Was that Samaritan's Purse or from Franklin?
No, Samaritan's Purse or Billy Graham.
Okay.
Every money he gave me, or every time his private jets were used or anything, it came from not from his personal at all. It all came from donations of people to Samaritan's Purse or Billy Graham Association, which a few years ago, I was adding it up. It was quite a bit. He used his private jet quite a bit. And I remember asking, how much does it cost each time you guys kind of do this flight? And it was about 30,000 each way. And I realized, I did a contract with him where they were going to do a documentary on Saeed. And I basically gave him all rights to the movie, and he had a camera crew flying to Boise, and he spent a great deal of money on this story. I actually have an email where I sent his secretary and I said, can you please tell Franklin not to give me money? I don't feel good about this. You guys have already done so much getting the word out. That's enough. I don't need private jets to go anywhere. I can happily fly on economy. But he continually did it. And I remember giving back the check to him at one point. He said, Naghmeh, you're really upsetting me. You need to accept. And so at that time, Franklin was becoming an idol to me. So I listened to whatever he said. And unfortunately, in the course of 2 years, I received around $30,000 from him. It was through Samaritan's Purse.
You mentioned Jay Sekulow. It sounds like he got involved pretty early on, advocating for you and, working legal channels to, I don't know, was he putting pressure on internationally on the Iranian government? How did that work? How did his advocacy help you? ACLJ
was pretty much the first people I contacted. They were involved from day one, even before Saeed went to an actual prison when he was under house arrest. And I actually didn't know exactly to the extent that what they could do. I was just told, hey, you need to contact the ACLJ. So I did, but they did a good job. I mean, they got the word out. At that time, Franklin and ACLJ were not very well known in social media world. Saeed noticed that from prison as he got access to a phone, that using his situation and later other people in the news is really what brought a lot of, I think, from a few thousand or maybe close, I don't know, tens of thousands to millions of followings and interaction. Saeed's story was a really big deal. It was while we were in the middle of a nuclear agreement with Iran. The reason I got called by Donald Trump to meet with him in 2014 was, I was told, is because it was the biggest issue on the internet. And so a lot of the GOP people wanted to meet, people running for president, including Ted Cruz, wanted to meet with me. They wanted to talk and be the hero of saving Saeed. So Jay Sekulow really got the word out. He spread the word and talking about religious freedom. And why is there a nuclear deal when there's Americans in prison in Iran? At that time, we thought Saeed was the only one. And then we realized there's a Marine, there's this. They were pretty much advising me on, they really brought it to the forefront.
There's no doubt that Jay's advocacy helped you, Franklin's advocacy helped you, but it helped them. And I did just look on their Facebook and notice the first posts about you back in 2012 or 2013, a few hundred engaged. By the time Franklin Graham posted about Saeed's release in 2016, it was like 240-some thousand likes. I mean, it just exploded.
If you look at their posts, both of their posts on anything in the 2012, before Saeed stuff, there was a few hundred likes on any of their posts, maybe 1,000, maybe a few thousand. It was not in the hundreds of thousands that it is right now, or the millions of followings that it is right now.
It became a huge story, a huge social media platform builder for them. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong. I mean, I've done stories about big stories, and there's no doubt.
And I appreciated them for it. I never, Saeed came out of prison, started attacking them. He felt like they had stolen his followers. I always appreciated them. Even when when the stuff about my abuse came out and they didn't believe me, I told them, I said, Saeed is going to come out and attack you because he thinks he's paranoid. He thinks you guys have stolen his fame. And so interesting that all Saeed could think of towards the end of his imprisonment was fame, because he would accuse me of stealing his fame. And I would say, this is about getting you out. Like, he saw that I was becoming confident and he didn't want that. So he kept making sure I knew I was, I'm sorry to say this, he called me whore, Jezebel, worthless. And people don't, if I remove my last name Abedini from you, if I come out and divorce you, you're going to be a nobody. If there's any attention to you, is because of me. And he just wanted to make sure I knew that. But I told Franklin and Jay, I really appreciated what they did. They really stood with me through advocacy for Saeed. They really did. And I told them, I said, please protect yourselves. Please protect your ministry. Please don't associate with Saeed. When he comes out, he's going to come after you, which he did. But no one believed me.
Well, and it was not a good PR story at the point that you came out about the abuse. That kind of ruined the fairy tale story of the, persecuted Christian who is a hero in everybody's eyes. And it was such a shock when this was, when it finally came out. End of October, beginning of November 2015, finally, you let your supporters know in an email about what's happening. But that happened because you had a discussion with a pastor where it sounds like you reached a breaking point. The pressure, all of the, again, Saeed's asking you to get out there and constantly travel. And so you're traveling all over. You've got kids at home that are missing their mom. You got incredible stress. You're being verbally, psychologically, emotionally abused by your husband, all of this. And the pressure finally gets to the point where you break down in front of a pastor and his wife, Dr. David Chadwick, who you were speaking at his church, and describe what happened and why the light bulb went on when he said to you, Naghmeh, you're being abused.
Yeah, the pressure had built up. It was October. I just done Saeed's prayer vigil, and I traveled 3 or 4 times in September. I had traveled to North Carolina. I'd spoken at a Baptist women's conference, then flown all the way to California, spoken at Joshua Springs Calvary Chapel. And then I was back again, North Carolina, speaking at Dr. Chadwick's church. I was exhausted. I hadn't talked to Saeed for a week because after my trip to Joshua Springs, Calvary Chapel, Saeed had called me and called me all sorts of names. And for the first time, I drew a boundary. I basically said, Saeed, if you can't be nice to me, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Don't call me. And he didn't call me again. He didn't call me even when he got out of prison. And my only request was, if you can't be nice to me, don't call. And so he didn't call. So I hadn't talked to Saeed for a week before I flew to Pastor Chadwick's church. And not having talked to him, I was just broken, because a big part of me still loved him. I wanted our family together. And I just couldn't make sense why he would attack me when I was laying down my life. And finally, I spilled the beans. I just said, Pastor Chadwick, I don't understand this. This is how it's been. This is how it is. Why would he attack me from prison? And he said, Naghmeh, do you know I'm not just a pastor? I have a doctorate degree. And I said, no, I didn't know that. He said, yeah, and my doctorate degree is in psychology. And he said, Naghmeh, you're an abused wife.
And you had never, till that point, admitted that to yourself?
No, it's kind of like you see stuff, but you don't put it together. It's kind of like you have a back pain, your body aches, there's different things, and you're eating Advil or Tylenol. And then you go to the doctor and says, oh, you're a stage 4 colon cancer. And you're like, oh, this is why all these symptoms. Tylenol doesn't fix it. A lot of times women under abuse start developing autoimmune, which I did. Most women I know have autoimmune diseases. And so I just couldn't put all of it together until Pastor Chadwick gave me that diagnosis, and everything made sense.
Wow. So as I understand it, that night, you put together an email to a group of about like 100 women or so that you really trusted, had been praying for you, and you had shared some pretty private stuff before. You get on the plane after sending this email, and by the time you get off, this email's been leaked. To this day, you don't know who leaked it. Again, you sent it to 100 people. And then when you're trying to find out who leaked it, you found out people are like, well, I gave it to I sent it to my mom, I sent it to my brother or whatever. So it's gone a million different ways, and, who knows how it actually got out. But you got off that plane. My understanding is that you got 3 calls. You may have gotten a lot more than this, but there were 3 that are really notable.
Well, I want to say that night that I spoke to Dr. Chadwick, I went to my hotel. I couldn't sleep. I Googled abuse. The next morning, my flight left at 6 a.m. I got on the plane. I cried all the way to, I think it was Texas. I had a layover. In my layover, I had about a couple hours. That's when I wrote the email. And I closed my laptop, and I don't know how many hours it is from Texas to Boise, maybe 3 or 4. And by the time I got here, my phone was exploding. There was a lot of calls coming from Franklin. And the email I sent, Franklin Graham, the email I sent, I don't know how many people. For the life of me, I don't remember, but it was over 100 people. It wasn't in the thousands. And it was trusted people that I had shared deep, intimate stuff with that had never been leaked. And I told them, please, I know you love Saeed. I know you love our family. You would never think bad of Saeed. I'm just feeling safe telling you this happened. And as you said, I felt like they wouldn't leak anything. I didn't even think someone would leak such a personal such a personal thing that I'd shared. Later, when I realized it was leaked to media, I asked, and like you said, people said, well, I sent it to my mom. I couldn't figure out who leaked it because they had sent it to so many people. It could have been them, the people that they sent it to. But when I landed, actually, the first phone call was that I answered after talking to my pastor, because I remember ignoring the phone calls until I could tell the story to my pastor. The first one, it was actually Franklin, and then it was George Wood, and then it was ACLJ.
Well, we're going to pause on Naghmeh's story there, but in part 2 of this podcast, you'll hear what happened in those phone calls with Franklin Graham and Jay Sekulow of the ACLJ, or American Center for Law and Justice. After learning of Naghmeh's horrific abuse, did they respond with support? Or was the abuse a public relations nightmare they needed to erase? Again, you'll hear all about that in part 2 of this podcast. You'll also hear exclusive audio obtained by the Roys Report of a meeting in 2016 between Naghmeh, Franklin Graham, and Saeed. Here's a short clip from that meeting.
It takes two people to make it work. If you want to make this work, you're going to have to move a little bit, okay?
Not an abuse. I'm sorry, but in abuse...
Don't tell me you're sorry, because it doesn't matter to me.
I'm sorry, Saeed, but the abuse has to be dealt with.
Well, there's so much more to this story, and in addition to that audio, I'll be sharing emails between Naghmeh and Franklin Graham, and also Anne Graham Lotz, who stood as an ally to Naghmeh. This is such an important story and has so much to teach the church about how to respond and how not to respond to victims of domestic violence. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Roys Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. I'm Julie Roys. If you'd like to connect with me online, just go to julieroys, spelled ROYS.com. That's julieroys.com. Also, just a quick reminder to subscribe to The Roys Report on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, and also now on Spotify. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, we'd really appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word about this podcast by leaving a review. And then please share the podcast on social media so more people can hear about this great content. Again, thanks so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day, and God bless.